So I think we're all anticipating big change with AI in the world of work. But how do we as HR practitioners prepare our organizations? That discussion is coming up now. And here we are on the HR Hub podcast with me, Andrea Adams. You can listen to learn about this and anything else related to HR. You can also find me on YouTube. So today my guest is again Ross Sparkman. Ross is currently the Senior Director of Workforce Strategy at Walmart, and he's held similar roles before at Meta and Nike. He's also releasing, by the time this comes out, he will have released the second edition of his book, Strategic Workforce Planning. And as I said before, I think Guru might sum him up and then some. Hi, Ross. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Andrea?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this one because it's really been on my mind. You see all these alarming stats around, you know, 60%. I don't know if this is the right stat. You can
Yep.
correct me, but 60% of the workforce's jobs are going to be obsolete. Maybe that's too high, but some percentage of jobs are going to be obsolete. Then the rest are going, the other 90% are going to change. And, these are alarming stats. So correct me, provide some context as to what you know around the degree to which AI is going to change jobs.
I'd say that probably right now, 20 to 30%, at least 20%, just today, not talking about 3 years from now, of the work that a lot of different roles do in a typical day could probably be augmented or supplemented or completely replaced through AI. If you think about the type of work that AI can replace right now, it is work that is more repetitive, tactical, more operational in nature
Yeah,
versus
yeah, yeah.
more of the creative, strategic, logic sort of driven work that still requires a human being. Um, and so that, if I think about the actual like entire roles that will be replaced, I think that there's some types of roles that will be replaced entirely, and again, those are roles where every single thing that an individual might do is something that could just be completely done by a computer. And it's not dissimilar to when manufacturing started to be automated, and there was assembly line workers that were just
Mhm.
replaced. I don't that still don't think that's going to be the majority of the roles that are replaced, and a lot of those roles have, not a lot, but some have already started to be replaced. I still don't think that's going to be the majority of them. I think, moreover, though, it really is going to be based on the tasks, and there's going to be certain tasks that are going to be replaced. What I see, though, and this is the big piece that I think should calm the nerves of a lot of folks, is that most leaders, if not every leader I've ever talked to, and I'm referring to like CEOs, they are not thinking about the impact of AI on the workforce in terms of we're going to get rid of a bunch of jobs. They're more thinking that, if AI can replace 20 or 30 or 40% of the boring part of the job that workers do, what can we use? Where can we shift their time and their energy uh, such that they don't have to do that work and they can focus on more value add work that's only humans can do. So it's not necessarily that they think that we're going to get rid of a bunch of workforce. It's more like, how do we upskill the workforce and have them doing work now that is more value add than they would have done in the future, and thereby hopefully become 20 or 30% more productive. So not necessarily getting rid of the workforce. It's more about, okay, there's a chunk of your role that you probably don't need to do anymore. You don't need to spend as much time reading documents and
Yeah.
whatever that might be, and you can now focus more on the stuff that humans are always going to be, well, hopefully always be the best at.
When you think about HR amidst all of this change around skills and who does what, that's all our territory.
Really is.
How do you see our role in all of this?
I think, and especially in this next, sort of, year to 5 year period, it's going to be absolutely critical role that HR will play. I think the first piece, there's two or three things really saliently too that I think are really ripe and primed for HR to lead efforts on.
Mhm.
The first is really truly understanding the work that's happening at every role and every job in the organization. Because, we talked a little bit earlier around like we think, 20, 30, 40% of the tasks of a particular job have the potential to be automated. Well, what tasks, right? So there's, this is something where typically in my past lives, you might bring a consultant in to kind of come and do a big assessment of, two or three roles to say, okay, well, what are all the tasks that happen in a typical day in the life of this role? That's going to have to happen, and
Hmm.
you know that's a massive undertaking. The organization is going to have to do this across all the roles, and that's going to be a big opportunity. Um, Opportunity plus plus challenge for HR. When we think about all these different tasks before any organization can really deploy the technology, we need to know where to deploy the technology, and how we're going to deploy the technology. And to do that, the first step is then, well, we have to unpack where it could potentially fit in, which again requires us to go and look at what are you doing in your typical day, and how can we get to a world where AI or agentic AI can replace that. Um, I think that we're at a point in time right now where I don't think it's on the radars of a lot of HR leaders or organizations that this
It
has to
is
happen.
not.
What I do see happening though is I think that a lot of organizations are saying, "Hey, here's a bunch of tools, employees, you can use these to become more productive." Yes, that is one element, and I think that employees will become more productive. But really, what needs to happen to gain those efficiencies, those 20, 30, 40%, 50% efficiencies, is you have to start to build in AI into the actual workflows of the roles. Right, AI actually becomes an employee in the business, and again, you can't do that. Where do you even begin until you know what work is happening? And I believe that is a big role of HR to start to kind of guide those efforts. At the minimum, to start to raise the red flag to say, hey, before we can really understand how to best utilize this technology, we have to understand the work. Uh, and then you start to get into a world of change management. Well, how do you go about doing this big task level assessment of the work without getting everybody freaked out? They're already freaked out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Even at scale, right? Like we're talking in some organizations, there could be thousands of different you know, roles or profiles. Here's what I say to at least the second part of that. So this is actually one of the better use cases for Gen AI that I've seen in HR, in that there's technology already out there that can actually help you quickly assess what the key tasks are, and how many of those tasks can be automated and are ripe to be automated for AI.
Yeah.
So that's some stuff that I've been doing and working on at Walmart right now. I think that that's the key, at least, to being able to get a starting point. If you start to spin up 2 or 3 year projects to get all this task level analysis, I think you're going to fall flat on your face because there's just too much work there. I think that you have to be able to use the AI itself, first, sort of pass at understanding where that work could be.
What do you think about just taking job descriptions and feeding them into AI and then say, AI, tell me what
That's
parts of this can be
That's
automated?
literally that's literally exactly what it is, Andrea. There's literally and there's some technology out there that can do that, and that's exactly what I'm saying. We need to actually go redesign the jobs. We need to redesign the job descriptions, right? And so guess what? We have to do now job design, right? And I remember taking HR classes,
Yeah,
in
me
school, and
too.
it's like job design. You don't hear about it a lot though. It's kind of like it was well, the jobs were designed 20 years ago or 15 or 10. I do think that there's a lot of job redesign that has to be done. Whether that's you know to help total rewards understand how much we're going to be paying people, whether it's being able to give good job descriptions when you're recruiting, whether it's just like, again, understanding where the work is going to be happening, and how it's going to be changing. But at some point there's going to have to be this big job redesign, and the entire inventory or catalog of job descriptions or profiles need to be updated. So that's another big body of work. Again, I think you could do this through AI, but it's a
But
big
still,
body of work.
you can do it through AI, and AI is going to make us do it faster, like by 1,000 times. Still a lot of work. Maybe we're not talking about retention so much at the moment, but we have, and we could in the future. I know that I don't want to let a whole ton of skill and organizational knowledge walk out the door because we don't need that position anymore. That's the kind of things I'm thinking about when it comes to the impact AI is going to have on the workplace and planning for that. What do you think about as a workforce planner?
When I think about the overall workforce and how that might change through I still think it's going to be less about having to do a big riff, but it's more about how do we ensure that we can get the most productivity from our
Mm,
workforce, and how do we ensure
right.
that we've matched, and maybe the term that we use is fungible talent, right? We make the workforce more fungible in terms of the talent that they have. And so rather than there being as many specialists, and maybe there'll still be an element or portion of the work that are specialists, more of the work becomes generalists built around AI, right? And
Oh,
generalist meaning, like, how do we get more strategic in the way we're thinking? And I'll just use HR, and I'll use even my job as an example. My role is actually one is I've done the assessment that is going to be impacted quite a bit by AI, and namely because in the past, and we talked about this a little bit in the other episode, there's been a lot of data that's involved in workforce planning, a lot of forecasting, right?
yeah.
Thinking about today versus the future, a lot of scenario modeling. There's going to be a world in the next 3 years, I believe, where you're going to be able to take your little prompt and say, how many employees should I hire in this business segment in the next 3 years, and give me a hiring plan. Like, you're going to be able to prompt an AI
Yeah.
agent to be able to do that, which is, again, that's 50, 60% of the work that I do. What can I do now with that extra 50 or 60% of the work? I'm going to be able to go out and work directly with leaders, right? I'm going to be able to spend my time thinking about strategically, how do we really, whether it's get the most out of the workforce through AI, or location strategies or productivity strategies, really spend a lot more time thinking strategically about the workforce, and less about doing the data and the engineering.
Okay, this is kind of a bit of an aside, but something I've thought about, and maybe you've thought about more, is the impact on younger workers. We earn our stripes, but that's a dumb phrase.
Mhm.
But we learn so much through these tactical things that we've done, and we learn about the business, and we learn about how the processes flow.
Mhm.
And a lot of that work can be automated or AI can do it. What are they going to be doing?
This is a really great question. This is the one that I think there's two schools of sort of thought. The first is that they're not going to be required anymore, and it's like, well, that doesn't make how can that make sense? Because at some point, people are going to start to retire, right? Um, and there's going to have to be some entry point. I think what's going to happen, honestly, I think, is that the bar is going to be raised, right? And so what that means is, like, what from a skill set perspective, what you might have needed from might have taken you 8, 10 years of job experience to get to that kind of mid level. That will be the baseline for just entering the workforce, from a skills perspective. And then if you want to develop and build your career and be somebody that moves through the organization, those individuals that are currently in a mid-year level position or mid-career level position need to understand that, hey, like, the bar is going to be dramatically increased. A lot of the things that I was doing that are tactical, maybe the easier work, are no longer going to be required from me. I need to start thinking about what comes next, and that's when we start talking about developmental opportunities, etc. That's one scenario. The other scenario is, you really just kind of try to keep doing things the way they are, and everybody's just going to have to up their skill level a little bit. But I don't see a world where there's not going to be some sort of a pretty big shift on what entry into the workforce means. That doesn't necessarily answer your question, though, Andrea, which is, like, how do you get and acquire some of those intangible, like, how do you interpersonal skills? How do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with change management? Those are the things that you come in to an organization, you just don't understand. It's not even on your radar. You have to kind of learn
Yeah,
the hard,
yeah, yeah.
right? So I think there's a gap there. I don't think there's an answer to that, Andrea. And I think, as I think through, I think this is another role of HR. This is
Mm,
exactly what we need to be thinking about. Like,
mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
how, because I think that that's probably what's going to happen is that you're going to have the skill level increase, but you need to figure out a way to get those individuals in the door, be ready to face some of the typical challenges that you just
Yeah.
need time to deal with for sure.
Uh, so most of HR isn't thinking about this strategically enough, at least not yet. We're still mostly, as far as I can tell, doing our normal thing. How are you approaching the integration of AI in a workforce planning sense? And how are you planning for it on behalf of Walmart?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually developing a Gen AI talent strategy. This is a big part of my role. This is kind of what I do. I'm always monitoring the external market. So, I mean, it's helpful to have somebody in a role like this, obviously, but a lot of organizations don't. I think that the driving force and some of the things that I was looking at was really just kind of what's happening in the tech industry. I was in the tech industry before, and I have really been following some of the some of the big organizations like Meta and Microsoft, et cetera, and seeing how they're approaching this and really paying
Mm,
attention to the comments. And what we've heard over the last 6 months, it's been really clear that and the actions that a lot of these organizations are taking, that this is a real thing, especially for technical talent, IT talent. Through the work that I've been doing, starting to get a better sense for, like, what actually has to happen in terms of, like, task level analysis, understanding, which roles will be impacted the most, where there might be, opportunities to kind of rethink, training and development and just developing a strategy and a timeline, getting an actual kind of like working group together where we start to think about short, long term, what actually has to happen, including finance and the business leaders and tech in the conversation, because obviously a big part of this is going to be, do you have the technical infrastructure to build out
oh,
agentic
yeah.
AI, et cetera?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of different moving parts, but definitely
Yes.
as part of that Gen AI talent strategy, or that AI talent strategy, HR needs to be there to think through what are the roles, how are they potentially going to be cost from a wage, and total rewards perspective. Need to think through again, through the lens of more technical talent. Do the types of technical talent that we're going to require in the future exist now, and if so, where are they located? To the earlier discussion around job descriptions, how do we start to think about our job descriptions? And we talked about this also, where across the workforce are we most likely to be impacted in the short, medium, and long
Yeah.
term? So all of these different things, but to the extent that you can get that talent, that sort of Gen AI talent strategy together, get the right people in the room, build out an initial high level plan, and start meeting regularly on it to talk about changes or progress is
Yeah.
is is really what we're doing, and I think what a lot of organizations need to start doing if they haven't already.
That's big, big picture stuff. What are some of the other things that we could be doing in HR to avoid future crisis and awful HR, which often comes in the form of downsizing, mass terminations? Like, what could we be doing to avoid that? Because I think that's what I'm thinking about most.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I think there are things that we can be doing. So I think for starters, good workforce planning is important, and I know we talked about in a previous conversation the role of workforce planning and HR and sort of that process. But I think there needs to be a little bit more criticality that goes into planning right now, specifically in the growth areas. So I think that it's important that HR and the workforce planning start to really raise the red flags around, hey, listen, if we don't do really good planning right now for these roles, there is a very real possibility in the future that we might have to have a big riff, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody
No.
wants, in 2 or 3 years or a year to go. It's just nobody. The employees that are impacted, the teams that have to go through that. So really bringing that really clearly home, and again, I think that should be a message that at the minimum the CPO and the CEO are putting across the business, getting out there, because if that doesn't happen, and it's not happening a lot right now, I think that there could be what you're saying in the tech industry right now. I think it's only a matter of time before that starts to trickle down across the rest of
Hmm.
the economy in different industries. I think it might maybe be 2 to 5 years. It might be 5 years for some, it might be 2 years, but That's why I pay so close attention, so much attention,
God.
so closely to the tech industry in this right now, because I feel like that's the sign of what's going to happen. And we can get ahead of that today by just thinking more strategically about how we're backfilling different roles, all the task and the job design that we're doing when we're actually going through the budgeting process, being a little bit more critical on when and where and how we're hiring incremental. I think it's the role of kind of HR again, workforce planning, to come in and kind of challenge the business to the extent that we need to. But that requires understanding the business, which is again all of the workforce planning things that we talked about earlier.
Mm, so much to this.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So much to this. I need to read your book. Speaking of your book, tell us where people can find you and tell us a bit about your book.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I really have been doing a lot of work on this space over the last year, so it's kind of a bit of a passion of mine right now. I actually wrote a book on strategic workforce planning. We talked about it a little bit. One of the chapters is actually on the role of kind of workforce planning and HR and Gen AI adoption,
Yeah.
and really kind of talks through a lot of this work right here. How do we go about doing a task level analysis, job redesign, some of the factors that we need to think about short, long, medium term. So it's a great resource to start thinking about this. I actually think I'm going. There's been so much interest and energy in this topic. I think I'm going to try to write another book on it, specifically designed.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, just
You
because
better
it's
get on it. It's
I do.
changing
I
so
need to.
fast. You have to work hard.
That's why I exactly. When I was in Kuala Lumpur last week. Somebody reached out to me. I'm like, I got to get this thing done because there's a lot of people that I think most organizations right now, if not every organization, is trying to figure out how to navigate this right now. Like, how do we get like we know that the all the board and the CEOs are really starting to know that it's there, it's possible, and there's a lot of leaders are starting to feel a lot of pressure. And I just think it's going to be something that becomes a higher priority over the next few years for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, get on it. When you're done, come talk to me and we'll have another
Exactly.
conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Ross. That really got me thinking. I am thinking about the productivity advantage of AI and how we can take advantage of that, but how we can mitigate, as a last question, how we can mitigate future crisis. Uh, and I'm going to read Ross's book, and I'm looking forward to the one that he's about to start. But thanks for listening out there. We'll catch you next time when I talk with another insightful guest.